This is a short video to share our thoughts on how the current COVID-19 crisis has impacted our property clients. The impacts I'm going to run through are mainly our personal experiences and obviously aren't reflective of the wider market. First, I'm going to talk about our commercial property clients. So these clients have suffered over the last 6 weeks or so from a non-payment of rent in most instances. Now this has impacted some more than others. Those clients that have got lots of properties in the retail sectors, the hospitality sector, travel sectors, have found that they've had a very low percentage of rent paid. But this isn't just limited to clients in those sectors. Clients with properties in the office sectors, the industrial sectors, and others have also found that they've had tenants that haven't paid their rent. And many believe this is as a result of the government announcements that statutory notices cannot be served on these tenants. After non-payment of rent, many of these tenants have entered into negotiations. I wouldn't say all, but most have entered into negotiations with the landlord and have put varying proposals forward to settle these rents. We've had some that have wanted to pay their rent on a monthly basis, some that have wished to defer the rent, others that wish to enjoy a rent holiday for a period in exchange, generally speaking, for either an extension to the lease, removal of a break, perhaps bringing forward of a rent review, perhaps rather in tongue-in-cheek as to whether any rent review would actually result in an increase of rent in the current market. And this, of course, has had a big impact on these clients' cash flows, many of which have got interest payments that are due quarterly, normally a couple of weeks after the rent is due to be collected. Now, if we've got a client that's got a portfolio of properties and some haven't paid the rent and some have, they can often make do, but single let SPVs, where there's one tenant and they have or haven't paid the rent, have obviously got to enter into discussions with the bank about potentially deferring repayments and interest. Interestingly, most banks are quite willing to enter into a deferral of the interest payment, but of course that doesn't stop the interest clock running. While the rent clock, the tenant is very willing to keep that turned off for 3 months, 6 months, however long this crisis may go on for. So we also have a lot of clients with properties in the residential sector, so these might be buy-to-lets, but also commercial property investors with much larger residential portfolios. Now these have again seen non-payment of rent by tenants, and in most instances these tenants are quite willing to enter into discussions with their landlord as to whether they will continue to pay the rent. Some have given notice because they realise they've either lost their job or need to move back to wherever they have if they've been on temporary employment in the UK, and that's meant them wanting to hand back these residential units to these landlords, which has caused a problem because these landlords can't actually re-let these properties in the current market. We have also on the transactional side, we've seen a number of pauses. We had a number of transactions that were ongoing at the time the lockdown started, and almost all of these got paused for different reasons. Either the bank is got its mind elsewhere and is on coronavirus loans, or a bank has got nervous on valuations, or the valuer that's not been able to sign off on the valuation of the property. Now, interestingly, in most instances, it hasn't been the buyer wanting to renegotiate the price or pull out of the transaction, and in most instances, our clients are talking about restarting these purchases or sales come the end of the current lockdown period. And then finally, we've got some clients that are property developers, and now depending on what they do and what they develop, they've been affected in different ways, but the biggest impact has clearly been that construction sites have either been shut down or needed to operate on a much slower basis because of the social distancing that needs to take place on these sites. This has been particularly difficult for a few clients that have had properties that were very close to completion, especially where these were largely pre-sold prior to the lockdown, and these clients have found it difficult to either get the show flats open so people can look around these apartments, or if they've got current transactions in trail, either exchanged or agreed sales, they've found it difficult to push these along. Again, not helped by government announcements wanting people to pause property moves, which a lot of developers think is strange when in most instances these people are moving into apartments that aren't currently occupied. So what has been the government response so far? as I touched on in the first section, it's mainly been on the side of tenants to enable tenants to stop paying rents, be they residential or commercial, without fear of eviction, which is of course the right short-term response, but it's put these people in a very strong negotiating position when it comes to negotiating in rents. How many lawyers I've spoken to over the last 6 weeks have indicated that this is a temporary position and that the non-payment of rent is just a deferment, and that these bills will come back to these companies. Whether that is actually what happens, or whether there is a widespread renegotiation of leases and tenancies, remains to be seen. Certainly everything so far has been quite temporary. There's been big announcements in the press about certain landlords, so Burger King, Travelodge and the like, that have said, yeah, we put forward our proposals, we don't want to pay rent for 6 to 9 months, but we'll give that back to the landlords at the end of the lease. Many landlords would say, well, they might well have renewed their leases anyway at the end, and therefore essentially this is an additional rent-free period. Government has also announced some mortgage holidays, and that's been helpful for some buy-to-let tenants, buy-to-let landlords, because those buy-to-let landlords have been able to defer their interest payments. And on the commercial side, we said there aren't any formal announcements by the government, but essentially most commercial lenders are willing to take a deferment on interest payments or repayment of loans, or issue short-term extensions where loans are due to expire in the last 2 to 3 months. Government-backed coronavirus loans have been useful to some clients, but I would say I haven't yet seen one within the property sector that has been easy to draw down on, because either these clients have got too much security and so the banks wish to push them down the normal borrowing routes, or the banks will see them as too risky ventures because they can't see when they're going to sell their apartments or when they're going to get their businesses back to normal. So what does the future hold for our property clients? I think there's many optimistic clients. There's certainly many clients that are looking to see whether they'll be able to pick up bargains, pick up distressed sales in the next 6 to 12 months. I think unlike previous crises, most property clients have come into this with money behind them, and an ability to get out there and purchase more property should the markets move in the way they see favourably. Certainly overseas clients have seen that the fall in value of the pound and the continued low level of the pound is an opportunity to buy more assets in sterling. And they again are waiting in the wings for the current crisis to be over. Hope that they can pick up some bargains and expand their businesses. So I hope you found this short video useful and informative. Please feel free to get in contact with me if you want to discuss anything I've talked about in this video, or if you wanted to talk about any other aspects of your business.